"No, I can't feel my
Just breathe.
legs," whispered the
We are
Apache
safe
woman,
here,
and the
and I won't
rancher
let
was
anything happen
frozen.
to you.
The Arizona sun burned overhead, relentless and harsh, turning the earth into a patchwork of browns, oranges, and reds. The wind carried the dry scent of sagebrush and dust, and occasionally the faint smell of cattle drifted through the air. Tom enjoyed these moments, alone on the open land, with nothing but the sound of his horse's hooves crunching over the rocky soil. It was quiet here, a kind of quiet that made you feel alive and small at the same time. Out here the world was simple: cattle to tend, fences to fix, and the land to respect. That morning Tom had risen earlier than usual. The air was still cool, a rare relief before the desert heat swallowed everything. He had saddled his horse, Maverick, and had been checking the northern fence line. He liked to start with the fences because he knew how quickly one broken post or torn wire could lead to chaos. His routine was methodical. First, he would ride out along the trail, inspecting each section. Then he would check the water troughs and the small creek that ran behind the ridge. It was ordinary work, repetitive and sometimes exhausting, but it was life. And it was honest. Tom had ridden about 3 miles from his farmhouse when he noticed something unusual in the distance. At first, it was easy to ignore. The desert often played tricks on the eyes. Heat waves created illusions, making rocks and shadows appear like figures moving in the distance. But this time it was different. The figure seemed to be moving, struggling along a rough patch of land. Tom squinted against the sunlight, his hand shading his eyes. It was a woman, alone, and she was having trouble walking. Her movements were slow, almost painful, and she kept stopping as if her legs were no longer cooperating. Instinctively, Tom urged Maverick forward, trying to get a better look. He was cautious. Out here, strangers were rare, and sudden encounters could be dangerous. But something in her presence called to him, a silent plea in the way she moved, the way she staggered. The closer he got, the more he realized how serious the situation was. Her legs were trembling. She had fallen at least once, and dust and scratches marred her skin. Tom's stomach tightened. The desert was merciless. One wrong step or a minor injury could quickly become life-threatening. As he dismounted, his boots crunching against the hard, sun-baked earth, he noticed her whispering something. At first he couldn't hear, and then, soft and trembling, came the words. "No, I can't feel my legs." Tom froze. He had heard stories over the years, hikers, travelers, or locals lost in the desert, injured, sometimes too late for help. But hearing those words directly from someone in front of him hit harder than he expected. The fear in her voice was raw, real, and it made his chest tighten. Tom approached slowly, keeping his voice calm. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here to help," he said. His words were steady, even as adrenaline raced through him. He knew panic could make things worse. "Can you tell me what happened?" The woman tried to speak, but the desert heat and pain had left her breathless. Her hands shook as she gestured weakly to her legs. Tom knelt beside her, careful not to frighten her. He could see the panic in her eyes, the way her fingers twitched uncontrollably. "I fell," she whispered finally. "I slipped, and now I can't feel." Her voice trailed off, the fear and uncertainty in her tone almost tangible. Tom's mind began working quickly. He scanned the surrounding area. There were no roads nearby, no sign of other people. The nearest ranger station was miles away, and cell service was non-existent. Out here, help was not just a call away, it required planning, strength, and courage. Every minute counted. He could see that she was weak, dehydrated, and possibly in shock. Time was critical. He gently felt her legs. She flinched at his touch, a sharp reminder of her pain. Tom realized she might have a spinal injury. He had seen injuries before, though not often, and he knew how dangerous a spinal injury could be. One wrong move could make things much worse. His heart pounded, but he had to stay calm. Fear wouldn't help her. Only action would. "Can you move at all?" he asked softly. She shook her head, her dark hair falling across her face, damp with sweat. Tom could see the dirt and dust caked on her skin from her fall. Her clothes were torn, evidence of a rough struggle against the desert terrain. He tried to reassure her. "I'm going to help you. We'll get you somewhere safe." As he assessed the situation, Tom realized he had to make a decision. There was no time to waste. Leaving her here was not an option. Taking her to the ranger station would be difficult, but it was necessary. He had blankets and water in his saddlebag. He had ropes, a first aid kit, and the experience to navigate the desert safely. Still, it was going to be exhausting. Every step would require care, every movement had to be deliberate. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Tom had always been self-reliant, comfortable with solitude, and used to handling emergencies alone. But this was different. This was life and death for someone else, and he felt a surge of responsibility. He couldn't abandon her, not when she was so clearly in need. The woman's eyes met his, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. She trusted him, even though she barely knew him. There was fear, yes, but also a glimmer of hope. And that hope, fragile as it was, gave Tom the determination to act. Slowly, carefully, Tom began to prepare to move her. He retrieved a blanket from his saddlebag, folding it as gently as he could to create a support for her. "I'm going to lift you onto the horse," he explained. "Take a deep breath. We'll go slow. You're safe with me." She nodded weakly, and he could see tears welling in her eyes, a mixture of pain and relief. Tom adjusted Maverick, calming the horse with gentle pats and soft words. He had ridden with Maverick for years, and they understood each other. The horse needed to remain calm, steady, and cooperative. Every step had to be deliberate, careful, because any sudden movement could worsen the woman's condition. As he lifted her, her weight pressed against him, and he could feel her trembling. "Almost there," he murmured, and slowly she was seated as comfortably as possible on the horse, supported by the folded blanket. Tom walked alongside, guiding Maverick over the uneven terrain. Every rock, every dip in the trail required attention. One misstep could be disastrous. The desert around them seemed endless. The sun climbed higher, and the heat began to press down like a heavy blanket. Sweat soaked Tom's shirt, and his arms ached from the effort. But he kept moving. He talked to her softly, asking questions, trying to distract her from the pain. "Do you have any water? Where are you from?" She whispered her answers, her voice faint but determined. She was from a nearby Apache community, traveling to visit sacred lands when the accident had occurred. Her story was fragmented, interrupted by groans of pain and exhaustion, but Tom listened carefully. Every word helped him understand her situation and kept her mind off the immediate danger. Hours felt like minutes. The journey had just begun, and the desert offered no mercy. But Tom's resolve never wavered. He had to keep her safe, had to get her help. The thought of failure, of leaving her stranded, pushed him forward. Step by step, mile by mile, they began their slow journey through the unforgiving landscape. As the shadows lengthened, Tom glanced at her again. She was quiet now, leaning slightly against him, exhausted but alive. And in that quiet moment he felt something profound. Out here, far from civilization, amid dust and rocks and scorching sun, the fragility of life was stark. But so was the strength of the human spirit. She had survived this long alone, and with his help she would survive a little longer. Tom didn't know what the next hours would bring. The desert was unpredictable, but he knew this: he would not stop, not until she was safe. Not until someone with the proper help could take over. And as he guided Maverick onward, the woman whispered again, barely audible over the wind. "Thank you," Tom nodded, sweat and dust streaking his face. He didn't answer immediately. Words seemed unnecessary. Actions mattered more. And in that moment, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the desert in gold and crimson, he realized something he hadn't fully understood before. Sometimes, being a rancher, a man used to solitude and hard work, meant stepping up for someone else in ways he had never imagined. And so the journey had begun, a journey of struggle, courage, and the unexpected bonds formed in the harshest of places. The desert heat had grown relentless by the time Tom Harper and Aeon, the Apache woman, had begun their slow journey toward safety. The sun was high overhead, turning the land into a harsh, shimmering expanse of heat and light. Every step of Maverick's hooves over the uneven ground kicked up clouds of dust that clung to their skin, hair, and clothes. Tom's shirt was drenched with sweat, but he didn't allow himself a pause. He knew that stopping for too long in this heat could be dangerous, not just for him, but for Aeon, whose condition was fragile and deteriorating with every passing minute. He kept speaking to her softly, even if she couldn't answer. "We're moving slowly, and that's okay. We'll get you somewhere safe," he said, more to calm himself than her. He could feel her trembling against him, her small body shivering with a mixture of fear and pain. Tom realized the severity of the situation. Out here in the middle of nowhere, there was no immediate help, no quick ride to a hospital, and no phone signal to call for aid. Every second was critical. Her face, partially hidden by her dark hair and dust, was pale. Her lips were cracked from dehydration, and her hands shook uncontrollably whenever she tried to adjust herself on the blanket that supported her. Tom could see the strain in her eyes, the exhaustion that came from fighting pain while desperately trying to stay conscious. "You're doing great," he murmured, trying to offer reassurance even though the words felt hollow against the vast emptiness of the desert. "We're almost through the worst part." The worst part, he realized, was not just the physical challenge of navigating the rocky terrain. It was the mental strain of knowing that one wrong move could worsen her condition. A slip, a stumble, or even Maverick stepping wrong could mean disaster. Tom's mind worked furiously, analyzing every rock, every incline, and every shadow. He guided Maverick carefully, stopping whenever he felt the horse's hooves falter or when the ground threatened to give way. As they moved, Aeon's voice finally came, soft and trembling. I was trying to reach the canyon," she whispered, her words broken and slow. "It's sacred land. My family, they wanted me to." Her voice trailed off, and Tom waited patiently, understanding that she was struggling to communicate through pain. He didn't push her. Instead, he nodded gently, encouraging her to rest. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the faint sounds of the desert, the whisper of the wind through sagebrush, the distant call of a hawk, and the steady rhythm of Maverick's steps. The desert seemed indifferent to their struggle, harsh and unforgiving, yet oddly beautiful in its own way. Tom couldn't help but feel a deep respect for it, even as it tested him and Aeon. An hour passed, or maybe two. Time seemed distorted under the blazing sun. Tom's arms ached from holding her steady, his legs burned from constant effort, and his mouth was dry, cracked from thirst. But every time he glanced at her, he felt renewed determination. Her eyes, though weary and frightened, held a quiet strength. She had survived so far on her own, and he would not let this desert defeat her now. Suddenly, a rocky incline forced Maverick to slow even further. Tom dismounted, feeling the uneven ground under his boots. "Stay with me," he instructed Aeon softly. "We'll get over this together." He carefully guided her, helping her shift slightly, making sure her weight was distributed evenly on the blanket. Her breathing was shallow but steady. As he led the horse up the incline, Tom noticed something that made his heart sink for a moment. Small rocks and sand crumbled under Maverick's hooves, making the path treacherous. One slip could cause a fall that would injure Aeon further. He took extra care, walking alongside the horse, holding the reins tightly in one hand and supporting her with the other. Sweat dripped into his eyes, but he didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. Finally, they reached the top of the incline. Tom let out a small sigh of relief. "Good job," he said quietly. Aeon's eyes met his, and for the first time a flicker of gratitude crossed her face. She nodded faintly, too weak to speak, but her eyes said enough. Tom felt a warmth in his chest. It wasn't heroism or pride, it was something deeper. He was human and she was human, and somehow their paths had crossed in this vast, merciless land. They continued on, and as the sun climbed higher, the heat became nearly unbearable. Tom realized that water was critical. He reached into his saddlebag and handed her a small canteen. She sipped carefully, her hands shaking. "Good," Tom said, smiling faintly. "Take your time." He waited patiently, watching as she drank, her throat slowly relaxing with the relief of hydration. As they moved forward, Aeon began to speak more clearly. She told him about her journey, about the land she was trying to reach, and about her family who had always instilled in her a deep respect for her heritage. She spoke of the Apache traditions, the sacred places, and the stories passed down from her elders. Tom listened, fascinated. He had known about the Apache in history books, but hearing it from someone who had grown up immersed in the culture gave it life. "Why were you here alone?" Tom asked gently, careful not to sound accusatory. "My family, they trusted me," Aeon said quietly. "I wanted to connect with the land, to remember the stories, but—" Her voice faltered and she shivered. Tom could see the weight of her disappointment and fear. He reached over, lightly placing a hand on hers. "It's okay. You're safe now. We'll get through this." She looked at him, eyes wide, a mixture of fear and gratitude. Tom realized something profound. Out here, help often came from strangers and trust had to be given carefully. Yet here she was, relying on him entirely. He felt the responsibility keenly. The hours passed slowly. The sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Tom knew that nightfall would bring a new set of dangers: colder temperatures, limited visibility, and nocturnal animals. He needed to find some kind of shelter or reach the ranger station before dark. He guided Maverick carefully, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of relief. As they walked, Tom noticed that Aeon had become quieter, lost in thought. He didn't press her. He understood that moments like this required space as well as support. Sometimes silence could be as comforting as words. And so he continued in quiet determination, focusing on the path ahead, step by step, mile by mile. Then came the first signs of exhaustion. Aeon's head drooped slightly, her arms grew weaker, and she shifted restlessly on the horse. Tom paused, setting his hand gently on her shoulder. "We need to take a short break," he said softly. "Just a few minutes, then we'll continue." She nodded, barely moving. Tom dismounted and helped her adjust on the blanket, careful not to strain her injured legs. He scanned the surroundings for a suitable resting spot. A small patch of shade offered by a lone mesquite tree seemed perfect. He guided Maverick under it and made sure Aeon was positioned safely. She closed her eyes for a moment, and Tom sat beside her, catching his own breath. The desert was unforgiving, but small moments like this offered a brief reprieve. While she rested, Tom considered their next steps. The nearest ranger station was still several miles away, and the terrain would only get rougher as they approached. He needed a plan, careful, deliberate, and patient. He checked the map in his head, recalling landmarks and trails he had memorized over years of working the land. Every detail mattered. Aeon stirred and opened her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Tom smiled faintly, understanding that gratitude was a quiet strength here in the middle of a dangerous journey. "We're not done yet," he replied gently, "but you're doing really well." Even as fatigue pressed down on them both, Tom refused to slow his pace too much. He knew the desert didn't forgive weakness easily. Step by step, careful and methodical, they continued. Each mile was a victory. Each safe movement was a triumph. And as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the desert in warm hues of orange and red, Tom felt a sense of resolve. They would survive. They would reach help. And though the journey was far from over, he knew that together, they had the strength to face whatever came next. The desert was a living, breathing challenge, one that tested every ounce of strength and determination Tom Harper had. By the time the sun reached its peak, the heat had intensified, pressing down on the land like a heavy, invisible weight. Tom's shirt clung to his back with sweat, his hat provided only partial relief, and Maverick's flanks glistened with exertion. Yet there was no time to stop. Aeon, the Apache woman whose life now rested in his hands, had grown weaker. Her trembling had increased, and the flicker of fear in her dark eyes was unmistakable. Tom adjusted the blanket beneath her carefully, making sure it cushioned her weight without putting pressure on her injured legs. "We'll take it slow," he whispered. "I know it's hard, but we'll get there." She nodded slightly, her lips cracked and dry, but she trusted him. It was a trust that Tom felt deeply, a responsibility that made every step feel heavier yet more important. The trail ahead was not forgiving. Rocky outcrops jutted from the earth, loose stones threatened Maverick's footing, and the occasional cactus loomed dangerously close. Tom guided the horse with careful hands, eyes scanning constantly for danger. One slip could worsen Aeon's injury or cause both of them to fall. Every careful step was a lesson in patience, and every mile traveled was a small victory. As they moved, Tom noticed Aeon beginning to speak more clearly. Her voice, though still weak, carried fragments of her story. "I wanted to see the canyon," she said slowly. "It's sacred. My family, it's important to them, to me." She faltered, her body shaking with exhaustion. Tom reached over gently, supporting her with a steady hand. "It's okay," he said softly. "You'll get there safely, I promise." Her eyes, dark and wary, met his briefly. In that glance, he saw more than fear, he saw courage, the kind that comes from someone who has faced hardship before. Aeon had been alone for hours, perhaps even longer, in unforgiving terrain, and yet she had survived. That realization filled Tom with determination. He would not let the desert defeat her now. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher and relentless in its glare. Tom's water supply was limited, and he knew that dehydration could be as dangerous as any fall or injury. He stopped briefly to give Aeon a sip from the canteen, watching as her hand shook violently as she brought it to her lips. "Careful," he said. "Take it slowly." She nodded, swallowing carefully, her throat dry but relieved. Tom allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Each small act of survival mattered, and each mile brought them closer to help. The terrain began to change. The flat desert plains gave way to rougher, rock-strewn hills. Maverick's footing became less secure, and Tom had to guide him with extra care. "Easy, boy," he murmured to the horse, adjusting his grip on the reins. "We're going to take it one step at a time." The horse responded, careful and steady, but the strain was evident. Tom's own muscles ached from constant vigilance, but he pushed through, refusing to falter. Aeon began to talk more about her journey, her words halting but meaningful. "My family, they teach respect for the land," she said softly. "The canyon, it has stories, old stories, our people remember." Tom listened intently, fascinated by her quiet wisdom. He had known of the Apache traditions in passing, but hearing them firsthand from someone who lived them gave him a profound sense of respect. It also gave him a renewed determination to get her to safety. By late afternoon, fatigue began to press more heavily. Aeon's movements were slower, her head drooping slightly as she tried to maintain balance on the horse. Tom realized that another rest was needed. He guided Maverick to a small outcropping that offered some shade, dismounting carefully to help Aeon adjust. She leaned against him slightly, exhaustion clear in her every motion. "We'll rest here for a few minutes," Tom said. "Then we keep going." While she rested, Tom surveyed the land. The ranger station they were heading toward was still several miles away, and the trail would become steeper and rockier as they approached the canyon area. Nightfall would soon bring colder temperatures and limited visibility, so time was critical. Tom made a silent plan, mapping out the safest path in his mind, calculating every risk. Aeon spoke quietly, almost to herself. I never thought someone would help me." Tom felt a lump in his throat. It wasn't often that people relied on him in such a complete way, and he realized the weight of responsibility he bore. "You're not alone now," he replied gently. "We'll get through this together." Her eyes met his, and in that moment a silent understanding passed between them. They resumed their journey step by step, mile by mile. As the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, the light shifted, painting the desert in warm tones of gold and amber. Shadows stretched across the rocky terrain, creating a surreal, almost otherworldly atmosphere. Tom guided Maverick with extra care, ensuring Aeon's comfort and safety as they traversed the increasingly difficult landscape. Suddenly, they encountered a narrow pass between two jagged cliffs. The path was barely wide enough for Maverick to pass, and one misstep could send them tumbling down the rocky slope. Tom dismounted, taking the lead with the reins in hand. "Stay close," he instructed Aeon softly. "We're going to move slowly through here." Her hands gripped the blanket tightly as he carefully guided the horse and helped her balance. Every rock was a potential hazard, every step a challenge. Tom felt the tension in his muscles, the strain of constant vigilance, but he didn't falter. His focus was absolute, centered entirely on keeping Aeon safe. Hours seemed to stretch endlessly. Sweat and dust coated their skin, and the sun's rays beat down relentlessly. Yet, even in the harshness, there was a quiet beauty to the desert. The wind carried faint scents of sage and distant flowers, and the horizon shimmered with a fiery glow as the sun began its slow descent. Tom felt a strange sense of calm amidst the chaos, a reminder that life, even in its harshest forms, held moments of profound wonder. Aeon, though exhausted, began to share more stories of her childhood, the traditions of her people, and the significance of the land they were traversing. She spoke of respect, patience, and resilience, values instilled in her by her family. Tom listened, absorbing every word. He realized that this journey was more than just a fight for survival. It was a lesson in humility and human connection. As evening approached, the temperature began to drop slightly, bringing relief from the scorching heat but introducing a new challenge, the approaching darkness. Tom knew that navigating in low light would be more difficult, especially on uneven terrain. He adjusted the blanket and guided Maverick carefully, preparing for the long hours ahead. Despite the exhaustion, Tom's determination never wavered. He spoke to Aeon softly, encouraging her to rest, to trust him, and to hold on just a little longer. Each word, each careful step, was a promise that he intended to keep. And as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting the desert in shades of deep orange and purple, Tom felt a surge of resolve. They were not out of danger yet. The terrain ahead promised more challenges, steeper inclines, rocky paths, and the uncertainty of nightfall. But Tom had learned something crucial from this journey. Strength wasn't just physical. It was patience, it was determination, and it was the courage to keep moving forward when the odds seemed impossible. Aeon's trust, fragile yet unwavering, gave him the motivation to persevere. Every mile they traveled together, every careful maneuver, reinforced a bond born of shared struggle and mutual reliance. Tom realized that survival in the desert was not just about endurance. It was about human connection, about the quiet determination to help someone in need, even when it was difficult, exhausting, and frightening. By the time darkness settled over the desert, Tom and Aeon had made significant progress. They were closer to the ranger station, and though the path ahead remained treacherous, there was a renewed sense of hope. The night brought cooler air, a welcome relief from the heat, and a chance to rest briefly before continuing the journey. Tom guided Maverick carefully to a small flat area, ensuring Aeon was safe and supported. Sitting beside her, he allowed himself a moment to reflect. The desert had tested them both in ways they hadn't anticipated, but they had persevered. He looked at Aeon, her face pale but serene, and felt a deep sense of responsibility and admiration. She had survived this long alone, and together they had overcome the immediate dangers of the harsh landscape. "We're almost there," he whispered, more to himself than to her. She nodded faintly, her trust evident even in her exhaustion. Tom knew the next day would bring more challenges, but for now, they had survived another day in the unforgiving desert, step by painstaking step. And as the stars began to emerge, scattered across the night sky like tiny beacons of hope, Tom felt a quiet determination settle in his heart. They would make it. They had to. The desert was harsh, but it was also a place of resilience, courage, and human connection. And together, they were proof of that truth. The night in the desert was calm but eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed in on you and made every sound stand out. Tom Harper and Aeon, the Apache woman, had managed to reach a small, flat area where Maverick could rest without risking a slip on the rocky terrain. The stars above stretched endlessly, glittering like scattered diamonds against the deep blue sky. It was beautiful, yet the beauty of the desert at night was deceptive. Out here, even the smallest misstep could lead to disaster. Tom carefully adjusted the blanket beneath Aeon, making sure she was as comfortable as possible. Her eyes were half closed, fatigue etched deeply on her face, but she stirred slightly when he spoke. "We'll rest here for a little while," he said gently. "Then we continue toward the ranger station." "You've been incredibly brave today." She gave a faint nod, too tired to speak, but Tom could see a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. As the minutes passed, Aeon began to speak softly, almost to herself, but loud enough for Tom to hear. I didn't think I would make it," she whispered. "I thought I would be alone forever out here." Her voice trembled. Tom realized that she had been carrying not just physical pain but a heavy burden of fear and isolation. The desert had tested her endurance, her courage, and her spirit, and she had survived, but only barely. Tom placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. "We're in this together. And you're stronger than you realize." Aeon looked at him, her dark eyes glistening with emotion. For the first time, she seemed to relax slightly, allowing herself to trust fully in someone else's care. She began to share more about herself, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I wanted to connect with the land," she said slowly. "It's sacred to my people. My family, we are taught to respect it, to listen to it, and to remember the stories." She paused, struggling to breathe through the pain in her legs. Tom listened quietly, absorbing every word. Her reverence for her heritage was palpable, and he felt a deep respect for her resilience and dedication. "The canyon," she continued, her voice trembling but determined, "is a place where our ancestors, they walked. They told the stories. It's important, not just to us but to who we are." She shifted slightly, grimacing in pain, and Tom carefully adjusted the blanket to ease her. "Discomfort. I had to see it, even if just once," she whispered. "But then I fell and I couldn't move." Tom felt a surge of empathy. He could imagine how difficult it must have been for her, alone in the desert, injured and struggling to survive. "You're here now," he said softly. "And you're going to make it, I promise." Aeon's lips quivered, and for a moment she closed her eyes, allowing herself to believe him. The hours passed slowly. The desert night brought cooler air, but it also introduced new dangers. Tom kept a careful watch on Maverick, who shifted restlessly, sensing the unfamiliar sounds of nocturnal animals in the distance. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the occasional rustle of small creatures in the bushes made the tension almost tangible. Tom's senses were heightened. Every sound, every shadow required attention. Aeon, despite her exhaustion, seemed to gain strength from the shared struggle. She began to ask questions about Tom, curious about the man who had risked so much to help her. How do you know the desert so well?" she asked softly. Tom smiled faintly, adjusting his hat to shield his eyes from the moonlight. "I've lived here all my life. It teaches you patience, respect, and caution. The desert doesn't forgive mistakes." She nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "but dangerous. You understand it. That's rare." Tom felt a sense of pride mixed with humility. Knowledge of the land was valuable, but so was the courage to act when someone needed help. He realized that this journey was teaching him as much as it was teaching her. As the night deepened, Aeon began to share memories of her family. She spoke of her childhood, learning traditions from her elders, and the importance of remembering the past. "We are taught to listen," she said quietly, "to understand, to respect. The land it speaks, if you know how to hear." Tom listened intently, realizing that these stories were not just history but a living connection to her culture and identity. Suddenly, a sharp wind blew through the canyon, rattling the rocks and sending a small cloud of dust swirling around them. Aeon shivered despite the blanket. Tom instinctively moved closer, placing a protective arm around her. "It's okay," he said firmly. "We're safe here. Just stay close and we'll continue in the morning." She nodded, leaning slightly against him, drawing strength from his presence. Hours passed with little movement. Tom kept talking, sharing stories of his life on the ranch, the challenges of the land, and the lessons he had learned over decades. Aeon listened, occasionally interjecting with soft questions or observations. Their conversation became a lifeline, a way to keep their minds focused and spirits lifted despite the physical pain and exhaustion. As dawn approached, the first light of morning began to paint the desert in soft hues of pink and gold. The night's dangers had passed, and with the new day came renewed hope. Tom gently helped Aeon adjust herself on the blanket, preparing to continue their journey. "We've made it through the night," he said. "Now we just need to keep moving. We're closer to help." Aeon's eyes shone with gratitude and determination. "Thank you," she whispered. I couldn't have done this alone." Tom smiled faintly, feeling the weight of their shared experience. He knew that the journey was far from over, but surviving the night had strengthened their bond and given them a renewed sense of purpose. They began to move again, slowly navigating the rocky terrain as the sun climbed higher. Tom guided Maverick with care, ensuring Aeon's comfort with every step. The desert stretched endlessly around them, beautiful and harsh in equal measure. But now, with the light of day and their shared determination, it seemed slightly less threatening. Along the way, Aeon began to speak more about the significance of her journey. She described the sacred places she had hoped to see, the rituals and traditions that connected her to her ancestors, and the sense of belonging she felt in the desert. Tom listened, captivated by her words and inspired by her courage. Her story was not just about survival but about identity, culture, and the human spirit's resilience. Hours passed as they continued toward the ranger station. The terrain grew more challenging, with steep inclines and loose rocks threatening each careful step. Tom guided Maverick steadily, never allowing himself to become complacent. He knew that one misstep could have serious consequences for Aeon. Yet despite the difficulty, he felt a sense of purpose and determination stronger than ever. At one point, Aeon winced in pain, her breathing shallow. Tom immediately dismounted and helped her adjust on the blanket. "Take a moment," he said gently. "We'll rest for a few minutes." She nodded, closing her eyes briefly, allowing herself a moment of relief. Tom watched over her carefully, aware that every second counted and that her strength was limited. During the rest, Aeon shared more of her personal reflections. She spoke of the lessons she had learned from her family, the importance of perseverance, and the value of connection, not just with the land, but with the people who cared for her. Tom realized that these insights were as important as any physical aid he could provide. They were a reminder of why he was here, why he was willing to push through exhaustion and danger to help another human being. As the afternoon sun began to lower, Tom knew they were drawing closer to the ranger station. The path ahead was still challenging, but there was hope. Aeon, though tired and in pain, seemed to regain some of her earlier strength. Her trust in Tom had deepened, and their shared journey had created a bond built on reliance, respect, and courage. Finally, after hours of slow, painstaking travel, Tom spotted the faint outline of the ranger station in the distance. Relief washed over him. "We're almost there," he said softly. Aeon's face brightened slightly, and she whispered a quiet thank you, her voice filled with emotion. Tom smiled faintly, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and pride. Though the journey was not yet over, the hardest part, surviving the night and navigating the treacherous terrain together, had been overcome. The desert had tested them both, physically and emotionally, but it had also shown them the strength of human spirit, trust, and resilience. As they approached the station, Tom guided Maverick carefully, ensuring Aeon remained stable and supported. The ranger station was a symbol of safety, hope, and the end of their immediate struggle. Yet, even as they neared it, the journey had changed them both profoundly. They had faced fear, pain, and uncertainty together, and they had emerged stronger for it. And as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, Tom and Aeon took their final steps toward safety, their bond solidified by the trials they had endured and the shared determination that had carried them through. By the time the first light of morning spread across the desert, Tom Harper and Aeon had made significant progress. The horizon glowed in soft shades of pink and gold, and the temperature had dropped slightly, offering a brief relief from the relentless heat of the previous day. Tom guided Maverick carefully along the rocky trail, every step deliberate, ensuring Aeon remained secure and comfortable. She was quiet, exhausted, but her trust in him had deepened overnight. Tom's eyes scanned the distance, searching for any sign of the ranger station. The outline of the small building was faint but unmistakable, perched on a slight rise, partially hidden by low shrubs. Relief surged through him, but he knew better than to let his guard down. The desert was unpredictable, and every step still carried risk. He leaned closer to Aeon, speaking softly. "We're almost there, just a little further and we'll be safe." She nodded faintly, her dark eyes tired but hopeful. The final stretch was not easy. Loose rocks threatened Maverick's footing, and the incline became steeper. Tom dismounted, walking alongside the horse, guiding it carefully while supporting Aeon with a steady hand. Every muscle in his body ached from the past 2 days of relentless effort, but he ignored it. Nothing mattered more than her safety. He could feel her trembling as she clutched the blanket around her, but her gaze remained focused on the faint outline of the ranger station ahead. As they drew closer, a sense of anticipation built between them. Tom could see the relief in Aeon's eyes, a mixture of hope, gratitude, and sheer exhaustion. The ranger station was a place of help, of safety, and the end of their immediate struggle, but reaching it required one final push. He encouraged Maverick to step carefully over a narrow ledge, guiding the horse with gentle words and steady hands. Aeon's hands tightened around the blanket, her body leaning slightly against him for support. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the edge of the station's clearing. Tom called out to the small building, and a ranger appeared at the door, startled at first but quickly recognizing the urgency. "We need help," Tom shouted, his voice firm and urgent. The ranger immediately understood, running toward them with medical equipment. Relief washed over Tom as he realized Aeon would finally receive the care she desperately needed. The ranger quickly assessed the situation, helping Tom lift Aeon from the blanket and onto a stretcher. She winced slightly in pain, but the professional calm of the rangers reassured her. Tom stayed close, guiding her gently, offering words of comfort. "You're safe now," he whispered. "Help is here, you're going to be okay." She looked at him, a faint smile crossing her lips despite her exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with genuine emotion. Aeon was transported quickly to the nearby hospital via a ranger vehicle, and Tom followed, ensuring she remained stable during the ride. The desert, which had been both beautiful and merciless over the past 2 days, receded behind them, replaced by the more controlled and predictable environment of roads and buildings. But even as the landscape changed, the lessons of the desert remained vivid in Tom's mind. Patience, vigilance, and determination had carried them through. At the hospital, Aeon was immediately taken into emergency care. Doctors and nurses worked efficiently, assessing her injuries and beginning treatment for her spinal trauma and dehydration. Tom waited anxiously in the reception area, his hands gripping the back of a chair as he reflected on the journey they had endured. Every rock, every step, every moment of fear and determination replayed in his mind. He had been tested in ways he had never imagined, and so had Aeon. Hours passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Tom's worry never fully dissipated, but he was reassured by the professionalism and efficiency of the medical staff. Finally, a doctor approached him, a gentle smile softening her serious expression. "She's stable," the doctor said. "The injury is serious, but with care and rehabilitation, she has a good chance of recovery." Tom felt a wave of relief so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. He nodded, unable to find words, feeling both gratitude and exhaustion. When Aeon emerged from the examination room, she looked pale but determined. Her eyes met Tom's, and a silent understanding passed between them. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and Tom took it gently. I owe you my life," she said softly. Tom shook his head, smiling faintly. "You were brave, you survived. That's your strength, not mine." She looked down briefly, then back up at him, a small, grateful smile on her lips. Over the next few days, Aeon began her recovery. Tom visited regularly, bringing supplies and sitting by her side, offering encouragement and listening as she shared more about her life, her family, and the significance of her journey. She spoke of the sacred land she had hoped to see, the stories of her ancestors, and the traditions that shaped her identity. Tom listened intently, fascinated by the depth of her connection to her heritage and inspired by her resilience. During this time, Aeon's gratitude and trust deepened into a quiet bond between them. She shared personal reflections, speaking of the fear and uncertainty she had faced in the desert, and the relief she felt when Tom appeared to help her. "I felt completely alone," she admitted one afternoon. "And then you came. I don't know how to explain it, but it gave me hope." Tom nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "Sometimes it's just about showing up," he said gently, "being there. That's all anyone can do." The hospital staff monitored Aeon closely, ensuring that her recovery proceeded without complications. Physical therapy began gradually, focusing on regaining strength and mobility. Tom continued to support her, accompanying her to sessions, encouraging her to push through the pain and fatigue. Every small victory, a few steps without assistance, a stronger grasp of balance, was celebrated quietly but meaningfully. As Aeon regained strength, she began to reflect on the desert journey, the challenges she had faced, and the lessons she had learned. She spoke of the value of resilience, the importance of trust, and the unexpected kindness of strangers. "I learned that even in the harshest places there is hope," she said softly, "and that people can surprise you with their courage and kindness." Tom smiled faintly, feeling the truth of her words. The desert had tested them both, but it had also revealed the strength of the human spirit. Finally, the day came when Aeon was ready to leave the hospital. Tom accompanied her to the vehicle, ensuring she was comfortable and supported. She turned to him, her eyes bright and filled with emotion. "Thank you," she said again, "for everything. I will never forget this." Tom nodded, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Neither will I," he replied. "Take care of yourself and remember, strength comes from within." As Aeon drove away, returning to her community and the sacred land she had longed to see, Tom stood quietly, watching her go. The desert, which had been both a place of danger and a place of profound beauty, lingered in his mind. He reflected on the journey, the obstacles, and the moments of fear and triumph. The experience had changed him, leaving a deep appreciation for courage, resilience, and the quiet bonds formed in times of need. Back at his ranch, Tom resumed his daily routine, but he did so with a new perspective. Every fence he mended, every water trough he checked, every moment spent under the sun reminded him of the fragility of life and the strength required to protect it. He often thought of Aeon, wondering how she was recovering, and he felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that she had survived and would continue to thrive. The desert remained vast and unyielding, but for Tom, it also represented connection, courage, and the unexpected ways in which lives could intersect. He had faced fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty, and through it all, he had discovered the profound impact of compassion and human determination. In the weeks that followed, Aeon sent letters to Tom, sharing stories of her continued recovery and the lessons she had learned from the desert journey. She spoke of her renewed connection to her family, her land, and her heritage, and she expressed deep gratitude for the man who had risked everything to help her survive. Tom cherished each letter, seeing in her words a reflection of the bond they had formed and the life lessons they had both gained from the shared experience. And so life returned to its quiet rhythm, the ranch, the desert, and the endless horizon, but with a lingering sense of purpose and reflection. Tom knew that the desert had tested them both, that it had demanded resilience, courage, and patience, but it had also offered a gift, the reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, humanity, kindness, and determination could prevail. The story of that journey, of Aeon's struggle and survival, and of Tom's unwavering determination to help, became a quiet legend in the small communities surrounding the desert. It was a story not just of survival, but of human connection, of courage in the face of fear, and of the ways in which ordinary people could rise to extraordinary challenges. And as the sun set over the vast expanse of Arizona desert, painting the landscape in hues of gold and crimson, Tom Harper stood on his ranch, reflecting on the journey, the bond formed, and the enduring lessons of courage, hope, and resilience. The desert, in all its harshness and beauty, had left its mark on both him and Aeon, a lasting reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, humanity could prevail.